31 German women were handed a church order on Christmas Eve. And one sentence made the barracks go silent. No prisoner section will be marked. Elsbeth Reiner read the translated line twice because the first time her mind refused to accept it. They were not being sent to a chapel at the edge of the camp, they were not being given a separate bench in the back. They were being ordered into the same Christmas service as American soldiers, the men who wore the uniform that had shelled her city, captured her convoy, and killed her husband outside Metz. She had expected hunger in captivity. She had expected insults, she had expected punishment, but she had not expected to kneel beside the enemy on the night Christians were supposed to speak of peace. December 24, 1945. Camp Ashford, Tennessee. The frost had turned the wire pale before sunrise, and the women in Barracks C stood around the notice board as if the paper itself were dangerous. The camp interpreter, a corporal from Milwaukee whose German carried his grandmother's accent, read the order aloud. All Protestant detainees will attend the Christmas Eve chapel service at 1900 hours. Attendance is mandatory. Seating will be open, American personnel and German detainees will worship in the same room. That was the line that changed the air. Open seating. No prisoner section. No wall between victor and defeated. No pretending that God had separate aisles for nations that had tried to destroy each other. Elsbeth felt her fingers curl into her sleeves. She was 36 years old, a former municipal clerk from Cologne, and for 8 years she had stamped forms for a government she learned to fear too late. Ration approvals, housing transfers, transit documents. Lists that arrived with polite headings, and left families missing. She had told herself, a clerk did not make policy, a clerk only handled paper, but paper had weight. Paper opened doors, paper closed them. Paper made absence look official. Then the war came home, her apartment building burned in an air raid. Her younger brother disappeared on the Eastern Front. And her husband, Friedrich, a field ambulance driver, died when American artillery hit a road column near Metz. The telegram had used the word fallen. As if he had simply lowered himself into the earth. As if steel had not entered him. As if some American gun crew had not done its work and gone on eating supper. Now Elsbeth was told to pray beside men who might have aimed those guns. Across the camp, Sergeant Caleb Mercer was reading the same order in the American duty room. He was 24, from a wheat farm outside Salina, Kansas. And he had come home from Europe with a body that looked unhurt and a soul that did not. His older brother Aaron had died in the Hurtgen forest. November 1944. A place of wet trees, artillery bursts, and mud so deep that men stopped believing the ground wanted them alive. Caleb had not been there when Aaron died. He had been farther south with an engineer unit, repairing roads the army would use to push into Germany. But the telegram found him in Belgium. We regret to inform you. 4 words that turned his mother gray before winter ended. After Germany surrendered, Caleb thought hatred would feel clean. He thought guarding German prisoners would feel like justice. It did not. It felt like standing watch over people who were too tired to look like monsters. And now command wanted him in chapel, in the same pews, during Christmas hymns. The chaplain said it would be good for everyone. Caleb did not trust that word anymore. Good. Good was what nations called themselves before asking boys to die. At 6:40 that evening, the German women formed outside their barracks. Their prison coats had been brushed as neatly as captivity allowed, some held small Bibles. One woman held a rosary until the guard reminded her she was scheduled for the Protestant service, not the Catholic Mass. Nobody laughed. The air was too cold for laughter. Elsbeth carried nothing except a tiny tin star wrapped in cloth and hidden inside her pocket. Friedrich had cut it from an empty ration can, in 1942, after they had no money for ornaments. He had punched 5 uneven points into the metal with a nail and told her, even a poor star can still point home. She had kept it through bombing, surrender, transport, and the ocean crossing. It was the last thing his hands had made for her. The chapel stood near the administration building. White boards, a plain wooden cross, windows glowing yellow in the dark. Inside, American soldiers were already seated. Some turned when the women entered, some looked away too quickly. Some stared with the raw expression of men trying to decide whether grief gave them permission to be cruel. Chaplain Andrew Keene stood at the front. He was a thin man in his 50s, with silver hair, a battlefield cough, and eyes that had seen too many prayers answered with silence. "Welcome," he said. The interpreter repeated it in German. Keene looked at both halves of the room. "Tonight there are no reserved pews. Sit where there is space." No one moved. Then an American private slid closer to the aisle, opening half a bench. Another man shifted his cap off the seat beside him. Small movements, not friendship, not forgiveness, but enough to make the order real. Elsbeth walked to the middle of the chapel because the back felt like shame and the front felt like defiance. She sat near the end of a pew, 3 feet away. Sergeant Caleb Mercer sat with a hymnal in both hands, gripping it like a shield. He did not know her name, she did not know his. They only knew the shape of each other's uniform. Enemy. Chaplain Keene let the silence sit. Then, he said, "We begin with a carol all of you may know." The organist touched the first notes. Caleb opened his hymnal, Silent Night. He knew it from Kansas Christmases, from candlelight services, and his mother's voice behind him, always slightly sharp, always brave. He began to sing because everyone around him began to sing. Silent night, holy night. His voice was dry. He felt foolish singing peace with prisoners in the room. Then he heard another sound, not English, German. Very quiet at first. Stilla knocked, Heilige knocked. Elsbeth did not choose to sing. The song pulled itself out of her. It was older than the war, older than Hitler, older than every banner that had tried to steal God and hang him on a flagpole. Her voice shook on the first line. Another German woman joined. Then another. Within seconds, 31 women were singing the carol in the language in which it had first been born. The Americans did not stop, they faltered, then found the melody again. English and German rose together under the small wooden roof. Caleb stared at the page until the words blurred. This was not supposed to happen. Enemy voices were not supposed to sound like his mother's church. German grief was not supposed to fit inside an American hymn. And Elsbeth, singing through tears beside a man who would not look at her, felt the same impossible thing. The song belonged to both of them. Which meant the night did, too. When the carol ended, the chapel did not move, no boots scraped, no cough broke the air. Even Chaplain Keene waited as if the silence had become part of the service. Then he said, "Let us pray." Everyone knelt. Caleb's knees touched the wood. Elsbeth knelt 3 feet away. For the first time since his brother died, Caleb realized that an enemy kneeling beside him was not powerful. She was vulnerable, her head was bowed, her hands were shaking. And if he wanted to hate her, he would have to do it while looking at a woman asking God to hold her together. Chaplain Keene's prayer was not gentle. It was quiet, but it did not hide. Lord, we come to you on the night your son entered a violent world. We come as Americans and Germans, as victors and prisoners, as the guilty, the grieving, the angry, and the ashamed. We do not ask you to call evil harmless. We do not ask you to erase what has been done. We ask for the strength to tell the truth without becoming servants of hatred. Elsbeth closed her eyes. Truth. That word frightened her more than the wire. Truth meant the forms, the stamps, the neighbors whose names moved from local files to transport lists. Truth meant the day she told herself obedience was safer than courage. Caleb heard the same word and thought of a German boy he had shot near a roadblock in March. The boy's rifle had jammed. Caleb fired anyway. It had been legal. It had been war. It had also been a face he still saw when sleep came too close. Keene continued, "Comfort the wives without husbands. Comfort the mothers without sons. Comfort the brothers who survived and do not know why." Caleb's grip tightened on the pew. Aaron. Elsbeth made a sound she tried to swallow. Friedrich. The prayer did not choose between them. That was what hurt. American grief and German grief did not cancel each other. They stood in the same room, and the room had to carry both. After the prayer, Keene read from Matthew, "You have heard that it was said, 'Love your neighbor, and hate your enemy.'" He did not rush the next sentence. "But I say to you, love your enemies, and pray for those who persecute you." The interpreter's German filled the pauses. Keene closed the Bible. "I know some of you hate those words tonight." A few American soldiers looked up. Several German women did too. "I have hated them myself," he said. "I served as a chaplain in the last war. I buried boys in France who died believing God loved their country more than any other. Then I buried boys on the other side of the line, and their prayer books held the same psalms." His voice hardened. "So let us be careful. Forgiveness is not forgetting. Mercy is not excuse. Grace does not bleach blood from history. But hatred is a second army. If you feed it after the war, it keeps marching through your children." That line entered the chapel and stayed there. Hatred is a second army. Caleb hated it because he knew it was true. Elsbeth hated it because she had lived under the first one. Keene looked toward the German women. "Some of you served a system that made obedience look clean, while it made cruelty efficient. Do not hide behind paperwork. Do not hide behind fear." Then he looked at the Americans. "And some of you have mistaken victory for innocence. Do not imagine that carrying the right flag makes every wound you caused easy for God to ignore." No one breathed comfortably. The child born tonight did not come to flatter nations. He came to save sinners. That includes the enemy you fear. It includes the enemy you blame. It includes you. The service moved on, more hymns. A reading from Luke. Communion. Keene lifted the bread and said, "This table does not belong to America, it does not belong to Germany. It belongs to Christ. And Christ knows exactly who is standing before him." Row by row, they came forward. Caleb received the bread with a numb hand. "The body of Christ, broken for you." Then the cup. "The blood of Christ, shed for you." He stepped aside. Elsbeth came after him. When Keene placed the bread in her palm, her face collapsed. Not dramatically. Not loudly, just enough for Caleb to see that she was fighting a grief too old to control. "For Mitch?" she whispered. "For me." Keene understood without translation. "Yes," he said, "for you." That was when Caleb's hatred lost its first inch of ground. Not because he excused her. Not because he forgot Aaron. But because he saw a woman who believed mercy might not reach her. And he recognized the fear. After the service, the prisoners were gathered near the chapel door. The Americans were supposed to file out first. Caleb stood by the exit on duty. Elsbeth passed him with her eyes lowered. Then the chapel door stuck in the damp frame, and Caleb pulled it open before she could struggle with it. It was nothing. A reflex. A farm boy opening a door. But Elsbeth stopped. She looked at his hand on the door, then at his face. "Thank you," she said in careful English. Caleb nodded. "You're welcome." The words sounded too ordinary for what the night had done. She hesitated. You sang for someone, she said. He frowned. In the prayer. Your face. He looked away. My brother. Aaron. He died in the forest. Elsbeth absorbed the words, as if they had weight. My husband, she said. Friedrich. Road near Metz. There it was, the bridge and the blade, his brother killed by Germans, her husband killed by Americans, both names spoken in the same doorway while a Christmas hymn still echoed behind them. Caleb forced himself to say it, I'm sorry. He expected the words to feel like betrayal, they did not. Elsbeth's eyes filled. I am sorry for Aaron. The guard called for the prisoners to move. Elsbeth joined the line. Caleb watched her go, and for the first time since the telegram, he wondered whether loyalty to the dead required hatred, or whether hatred had been using the dead as shelter. The next week, Elsbeth asked to speak with Chaplain Keene. She sat in his office with the interpreter beside her and the tin star hidden in her fist. I have a question, she said. Keene folded his hands. Ask it. If a person did not kill, but helped the killing become organized, can God forgive that? The interpreter's voice cracked on the last words. Keene did not answer quickly. That was his mercy. He made room for the question to be as heavy as it was. What did you do? He asked. Elsbeth told him about the office in Cologne. About the stamps. About the names. About the Jewish tailor's daughter who used to bring forms in for her father because his hands shook too badly. One morning the girl's name disappeared from the housing register. Elsbeth had known what that meant. Not fully, not with every detail. But enough. I told myself I was small, she said. I told myself the machine would run without me. Keene's face did not soften into cheap comfort. That may be true, he said. But the machine used your hands. She nodded and began to cry. Yes. Then start there, he said. Not with excuses, with truth. She confessed until her voice was gone. Keene listened. Then he said, grace is not God pretending sin did not happen. Grace is God entering the room after the truth has been spoken. He placed one hand lightly on her bowed head. In the name of Jesus Christ, you are forgiven. Now spend the rest of your life refusing to make peace with lies. That sentence became her sentence. Refuse to make peace with lies. 2 Sundays later, Caleb came to the same office. He had not planned to. He knocked once and entered before courage could leave. Keene looked up. Sergeant Mercer. Caleb sat down. I prayed for a German dead man this morning. Keene waited. Her husband. Friedrich. I don't know why I did it. Did it feel wrong? It felt like I was stealing something from Aaron. Was Aaron loved less because you prayed for another man? Caleb stared at the floor. No. Was Germany's evil made smaller? No. Then perhaps you were not stealing from your brother. Perhaps you were refusing to let the war decide the size of your soul. Caleb's mouth tightened. I killed a boy in March, he said. The words came out before he could stop them. He was armed, it was war. I did what I was trained to do. But I remember his face more clearly than some faces in my own family. Keene leaned back. The law may call it combat, your conscience may still call it a wound. Caleb covered his eyes. I don't know how to carry both. You carry both by telling the truth about both, Keene said. You fought a necessary war against a monstrous regime. And you still need mercy. Those truths do not cancel each other, either. From that week on, Caleb prayed for Aaron first, then, quietly, for Friedrich. Elsbeth prayed for Friedrich first, then, quietly, for Aaron. They did not become friends, not yet. Friendship would have been too easy a word. They became witnesses. Each knew the other was trying to keep hatred from recruiting the dead. By February, the chapel had changed. Not visibly. The same plain cross stood at the front. The same draft entered under the door. The same soldiers sat with their shoulders tight. The same women wore the same gray coats. But small things began happening. A hymnal passed across a gap without hesitation. A German woman dropped her glove and an American private picked it up without making a joke. During a prayer for destroyed homes, 2 soldiers bowed their heads for German cities. During a prayer for liberated camps, 3 German women wept without defending themselves. The room did not become innocent, it became honest. That was harder. On the last Sunday before repatriation, Chaplain Keene chose the opening hymn himself. A mighty fortress is our God. The organ began. The Americans sang in English. The Germans sang in Luther's German. The melody held them together with a strength no order could have commanded. Caleb looked across the pew and saw Elsbeth holding the little tin star between her palms. Not wearing it, not displaying it, just holding it like a promise she was afraid to lose. After the benediction, the women were allowed coffee in the fellowship room. Weak coffee, dry cookies, a luxury after war. Caleb found Elsbeth standing near the window, watching frost melt on the glass. "Mrs. Reiner," he said. She turned, "Sergeant Mercer." He had practiced a speech, it disappeared. So he told the truth. "I wanted you to know, I prayed for Friedrich again." Her eyes lowered, "Thank you." "And I wanted to say," he stopped. "I don't know how to forgive what Germany did." "You should not forgive lies," she said. The answer surprised him. She looked at him directly. "If forgiveness means saying it was not evil, then no. Do not forgive that. But if forgiveness means refusing to let evil teach you how to hate forever." She searched for the words. "Then maybe we both must learn." Caleb felt the room go quiet around them. "I've been angry so long, I don't know what I am without it." Elsbeth nodded. "I obeyed so long, I do not know what courage sounds like." They stood there with their separate ruins. Then Elsbeth unfolded the cloth in her hand. The tin star lay inside, dull silver, scratched, uneven, one point bent from years in her pocket. "Friedrich made this from a ration can," she said. "He said even a poor star can point home." Caleb shook his head. "I can't take that. I am not giving away my husband," she said. "I am asking you to remember he was human." He could not speak. She pressed the star into his palm. "And remember that German hands did not only sign orders or hold rifles. Sometimes they made small, beautiful things in dark years." Caleb closed his hand around it carefully. "I'll keep it. I know." The women left Camp Ashford 3 days later. A green army bus waited near the gate. Elsbeth boarded with 1 suitcase, 1 Bible, and no tin star. Caleb stood outside in the cold. When she saw him through the bus window, she lifted her hand. He lifted his. No salute, just a hand. The bus pulled away. Caleb watched until the taillights disappeared beyond the wire. Then he opened his palm. The star was cold, small. Almost weightless, but he felt as if he were holding the first honest thing the war had given back. Years passed. Elsbeth returned to Cologne and found a city that looked like a broken jaw. She worked in a records office again, but this time she used paper differently. She helped families search for missing people. She copied names from survivor lists. She wrote letters for widows who could not face official language anymore. Whenever a form seemed too clean for the suffering it carried, she remembered Keene's sentence. Refuse to make peace with lies. Caleb returned to Kansas and married a schoolteacher named Ruth. He farmed wheat, raised 2 daughters, and kept a tin star in the top drawer of his dresser. For years, he did not tell many people where it came from. When he did, some men said he had gone soft. One veteran told him, "You forgot what they were." Caleb answered, "No. I learned what hatred wanted me to become." Elsbeth and Caleb exchanged letters for 32 years, not often. Christmas, mostly. A line about weather, a line about children, a line about the dead. She wrote Aaron's name every year, he wrote Friedrich's. That was their treaty, not between nations. Between two wounded people who refused to let the Second Army keep marching. In 1978, Caleb received a letter from Elsbeth's daughter. Her mother was dying. She had asked whether the American sergeant still had the star. Caleb flew to Germany with Ruth beside him and the tin star wrapped in a handkerchief in his coat pocket. Elsbeth was small in the hospital bed, her hair white, her hands thinner than he remembered. But when he placed the star in her palm, she laughed softly. "You kept it. Every day. Did it point home?" Caleb thought of Aaron, of the German boy at the roadblock. Of Christmas Eve in a Tennessee chapel. Of a hymn sung in 2 languages, by people who did not know how to stop being enemies. "Not at first," he said. "But eventually." Elsbeth closed her fingers around the star, then gave it back. "No," she whispered. "It belongs to the lesson now." She died 2 days later. Caleb attended the funeral and stood beside her family while a German pastor read the words he had heard in that camp chapel decades before. "Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you." After Caleb died, his daughters found the tin star with a bundle of letters tied in blue thread. On the outside of the bundle, in Caleb's handwriting, were 5 words. "The chapel without sides." The letters and the star were later placed in a small reconciliation exhibit at a church archive in Kansas. The display did not claim that one chapel erased the war, it did not claim that one hymn healed Europe. It did not say forgiveness made guilt disappear, it said something harder. On Christmas Eve, 1945, 31 German women and 42 American soldiers were ordered into the same chapel. They arrived as enemies. They sang the same carol in 2 languages. And for 1 hour, hatred found no separate pew to sit in. That was the miracle. Not that the war was forgotten, not that justice became unnecessary, but that 2 people who had every reason to let grief become a weapon chose, again and again, to put it down. A tin star survived the war. A hymn crossed the room. And the chapel without sides taught them that grace does not erase the truth. It gives human beings the courage to face it, without becoming enemies forever.